One of the very specific adaptations you have to live there is having small appendages. Now we just saw one of the very back. These animals have smaller pectoral flippers on the side of their body. They have a smaller tail than you might expect to see. For those of you underwater, you're seeing Cadmus went past you, the size of her appendages. Here beside me have a spinning beluga. You're having a chance to see her pectoral flippers as she does a bit of a twist. But these incredible animals do have smaller appendages than you might expect to see on an animal of this size. Now, think of it this way. When you're cold, what part of you gets cold first? Your fingers, your toes, sometimes your ears and your nose. Oh, that's totally right. Yes. Not only will your appendages get cold first, in the case of a beluga living in cold salt water, the same thing can happen to them. So by having small appendages, they're able to keep that body heat close to themselves. Now, even though their appendages may be small, you're seeing it in the back there, that size of tail, even though they're small, beluga tails and flippers are able to propel them through the water. In fact, these animals have been known to reach a speed of 22 kilometers an hour. That's about 12 miles per hour, and sometimes they can leap out of the water, as you're seeing demonstrated in the center of the habitat. So it's very impressive, these animals and that small appendages that they have on their body. But that's a beluga adaptation for life in the Arctic. What about the people I mentioned living there? Well, we're talking about Inuit, who have survived and thrived in the Arctic for well over 5,000 years. And they've been able to live up in this place by living off of the land, namely in how they get their vitamins and minerals. Now, in our case, we go to the grocery store on a daily basis. We buy our fruits and veggies, and that's how we stay healthy. But in the Arctic, perhaps you have to rely on the layer of blubber that surrounds the body of a beluga to get the vitamins that you need. In fact, as you're seeing from Keely here beside me, she's got a very thick layer of blubber on her body. If you're seeing Kavna underwater, you're seeing it as well. 40% of these animals are covered in that blubber. So for Inuit, by consuming that layer of blubber, they get the same number of vitamins and minerals that we would get from fruits and veggies. Now, what's really cool is every part of a beluga can be used by Inuit. Even the skin can be used for things like shoelaces. So very, very cool. Now, even with these adaptations of small appendages and living off of the land, life in the Arctic is getting to be a little bit more difficult. And this is coming from the fact that these animals are living in a changing environment. Now, people like myself and yourselves, we all use electricity. And the more electricity we use, the more carbon dioxide gas we produce. That gas goes up into the atmosphere and impacts the belugas because it's actually forming a blanket around the planet. Kind of like the blanket of blubber keeps them warm. The blanket of carbon is keeping the planet warm. And where we're seeing this the most is in the Arctic, where these animals live. But what exactly does that mean for a beluga? Well, it means it has everything to do with the food chain. Look at a twisting, turning Keela beside us here. We've got Cabinet Center. We've got Aurora poking her head up in the back. It has everything to do with the food chain. Now, in the Arctic, you have sea ice. And sea ice algae is growing underneath of that sea ice. Now, what actually happens is you have small invertebrates, things like shrimps and crabs. They're eating the algae. They in turn are eaten by fish, who are eaten by bigger fish, who are eaten by fantastic white belugas like Edna. Or even possibly to provide the body with energy to leap out of the water, like Keela's showing you here. A lot of animals have to be eaten by belugas. These animals are 800 kilograms, lots of food in order for them to survive. So that's very impressive when you think about it. But what we are seeing is a loss of sea ice in the Arctic, and that has a big impact on not only belugas, but the people living there as well. Now we're talking about belugas in the Arctic. Let's talk about belugas that live somewhere else. I may have misled you, but there is a population of these animals in eastern Canada. Is anyone joining us today from eastern Canada? Let's see some hands. I'm from Ontario. See a couple hands. Welcome to Vancouver. Perhaps don't rely on belugas for food value like Inuit do, but you might rely on them for economic value. Now what that means is in the St. Lawrence River, there are roughly 1,000 beluga whales that live there. You're probably not going to see a beluga tail walking like Keela is here in the habitat. If you do have a chance to see those roughly 1,000 whales in the St. Lawrence, what you're more likely to see is what Kavna is demonstrating for you in the center of the habitat. As she's moving through the water, you're seeing just her back. You can see Keela's back as well. You might see the head of a beluga poking out like Aurora back there. But really what you're seeing is the back of these animals. Now hands up if you can see the ridge on the back of the whale. You might be wondering, what is that? Okay, so we can all see it. That's called a dorsal ridge, and actually it's unique to each whale, just like our fingerprints are to ourselves. So actually there are researchers in the St. Lawrence looking at these animals and being able to identify them from each other, and they look at that ridge. But one of the things those researchers are telling us is that the environment of the belugas in the St. Lawrence is changing very quickly, just like the environment is in the Arctic. And it's changing because these animals live very close to the two largest cities in Canada. Now those cities happen to be Toronto and Montreal, but I'm hoping someone in the audience can yell out for me what kind of a challenge you think a beluga would face from those large cities. The hint is it begins with the letter P. Pollution, absolutely. Nicely done, guys. Let's talk about two types of pollution. We're talking about waste pollution and noise pollution. The first one is those waste, the chemicals and toxins that absolutely build up in the environment of a beluga whale. Now what happens is these animals eat the food that might be full of toxins, and it builds up in the layer of blubber that surrounds their body. And as Keela's demonstrating again, 40% of her body is that layer of fat. But what we really see is the blubber acts like a sponge. It holds on to the chemicals from the environment, and it gets to the point where it can be lethal for the animal. In fact, there's been cases where these animals have washed ashore and have to be treated as if they're toxic waste. So that's a huge concern for these animals. Not only is that a concern, but shallow rivers and estuaries are also an important part of the habitat for beluga whales. They actually very easily move into these places. For those of you underwater and above, I want to direct your attention to the back of the habitat where Keela is going to beach herself and show you just how comfortable she is in that shallow water. In fact, watch how she moves out as well, how easily she can move in and out of those places. Now these shallow places are great for whales to scratch off extra skin. They can find food in these places, but sometimes the water can be very murky. So instead of locating each other with their eyes, they can actually communicate with sound. Now belugas do produce a wide variety of sounds, and if we listen carefully, we might get to hear them. I think we should give those whales a round of applause, don't you? There is a huge variety of sounds that belugas are capable of producing, and as noisy as they are, their sounds can easily be overridden by human sounds like boats or construction happening in those shallow rivers and estuaries. So that's another concern for belugas and their survival. Now the sounds you just heard these animals make are exciting to us because we have the chance for researchers to come here and work very closely with the animals thanks to the relationship you see trainers like Katie in the center of the habitat building and maintaining. But Katie, tell us more about what you do.
Thanks, Lauren. Hey everyone, I'm giving you guys a wave so you can see where my voice is coming from. Thanks for waving back. I'm over here with Kavna, who I've had the pleasure of working with for over 4 years now. Now, I love the variety of training that we get to do with our animals each and every day, but it's not just the show behaviors that we work with them. Really, the most important type of training that we do is what we refer to as husbandry training, and all that means is any voluntary medical behavior that we ask of them. So it could be something as simple as asking them to open their mouth and look at their teeth or gums, or like what I've asked Kavna to do here is just to present her back to me. I can give her a quick once-over, see if she has any new cuts or scrapes on her. We can also do other voluntary exams, like voluntary ultrasounds or voluntary blood samples. Now, all of our trust and training allows us the opportunity to make sure that we're taking the best possible care of our animals each and every day, and also participate in those meaningful research projects that just wouldn't be possible with belugas up in the Arctic or out in the St. Lawrence. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Katie. And not only do we have the chance to participate in these meaningful research projects, We get to work with these incredible animals every single day and share them with folks like yourselves who maybe have never seen them before or may not have a chance to see them in the Arctic or the St. Lawrence. Now you may have noticed some people in the back who are having a pretty incredible encounter with one of the belugas. That's Aurora back there. And the encounter participants are really great because it gives us the chance to get the animals used to different people coming in and working with them, which makes it easier for researchers to come here as well. If you're curious about those encounters, feel free to come up and ask me at the end of the show. But we really are excited to share these animals with people. And I know for myself, the very first time I saw a beluga was here at the Vancouver Aquarium, like many of you. And I'm reminded of how intelligent and curious these animals are, but also of how quickly their environment is changing every single day. Now today we've talked about the small changes that the changes that are happening in the environment, but the small changes that many of you have probably already made in your lives are great too. Turning off your lights, washing your clothes in cold water, but think bigger. Think as huge as a beluga whale that's as big as a Kavana, who's in the center of the habitat right here. Big changes that you can do. Small things are great, but even something as simple as knowing where your products are coming from. Choosing to buy local is a great way to reduce the amount of energy that we use in order to survive. But most importantly, we actually want you to leave today with a better understanding of how your lives and the lives of animals like Kavana, Aurora, and Keela are actually very intimately connected. Well, on behalf of myself, the trainers, and the beluga whales, we do want to thank you so much for joining us here at the Vancouver Aquarium. This is the tail end of the show, and if you're seeing a tail facing you, heads up! Because you are now intimately connected with a beluga whale. Was that not enough for you? Do you guys want to see some more? I don't know. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Lauren. If you have any questions about belugas, feel free to come on over and ask. I would love to help you out. While you see Adria finishing up, please give her a discretion.